You know, I love the Rangers. I love the Kings. I love the fan bases of these two teams every time we make a video about your squads. It's always very warm and welcoming, and I'm always super humbled every time we talk about these teams because the fans are always so welcoming whenever I make a video entering your world, and you always talk to me in the comments about your teams and everything, so it's fun. So believe me when I say that a video like this does not make me too happy when I have to sit down and talk about it. But at the end of the day, this is a topic that I do think is quite solid now. You know, it probably has been that way for a few months, maybe even a few years up to this point, but I feel like now we're really starting to get the sense that when it comes to the 2020 NHL Entry Draft, and the top three that went as follows: the New York Rangers taking Alexis Lafreniere first overall, the LA Kings taking Quinton Byfield second overall, and the Ottawa Senators taking Tim Stutzle third. I think it's very plain to see that with all hindsight included, at least 3 years beyond the draft, that Tim Stutzle was by far and away the best pick available. Now I know, this might come as a shocker to anybody in LA who is looking for Byfield and how he's going to become good, and I don't want to discredit that idea. He can become good. Same thing with Alexis Lafreniere. He's been on a little bit of a mini heater the past little while here, but just because it's been 3 years, and for all 3 of these years, Tim Stutzle has been so dominant, and now in 2022-2023, it's gotten to a point where Stutzle earlier yesterday was named the NHL's Player of the Week, I feel like now is a better time than ever to just go over Jimmy Stu, go over what makes him such an incredible hockey player, go over the numbers, go over the comparisons with other players in the 2020 draft, and specifically talk about the 2 guys that went ahead of him, 1 and 2, Lafreniere and Byfield. So before we get that underway, I just wanted to say one more disclaimer to any LA or New York fan that's out there. I love your guys. They're good players and they have long, bright NHL careers ahead of them. These guys are only 21 years old. 20 years old in some cases, so there's a lot of time for these guys to go out there and prove me wrong and reestablish themselves at the top of the totem pole for 2020 draft eligible players. But for now, because it's been so long where this guy was number 1, and he is so good that he was the number 1 player all week last week in the entire NHL, Jimmy Stu is getting his spotlight here today. So let's head over to Tim Stutzle and talk about his overall profile here, starting out with before the draft, mostly because I feel like it's sort of a vindicating type of conversation to be having, looking at how Tim Stutzle had 10 points in his last 5 games played, 4 goals, 6 assists, 16 points in his last 10 games. He is up to 59 points in 52 games this season on the Ottawa Senators, on pace for 89 points in a 78-game campaign. He's got 26 goals. That's already a career high, and he's on pace for 39 goals on the year. It's kind of vindicating seeing how, at 21 years old, Tim Stutzle is already this good, because if you take a time machine back to 2019, the summer of 2019, you would find YouTubers like me, for example, making videos about Tim Stutzle and how this guy was supposed to be the next German phenom. How there were articles coming out in German newspapers talking about how this guy was going to be the next best German player since Draisaitl. And that was a pretty big sort of expectation to fill. Like, of course, everybody knew heading into 2019-20's year that this would be the Lafreniere draft. Lafreniere Byfield, 1 and 2. Who's going to go 1? And everybody knew it would be these 2 CHL guys. But at the beginning of the season, Jimmy Stu was not really touted as the 3rd overall guy. In fact, you had some scouting outlets that had him as low as 7/8 overall, I remember. So just hyping him up early on at the beginning of the 2019 season, I remember I was doing like an internship at 604 Records or something like that back in the summer of 2019, and I made a video before one of my internship days, starting out the conversation on Stutzle a year before he would even be drafted, saying, hey, this guy's going to be the real deal. He is so offensively talented, he's dynamic, he can do it all, he's got skills, he's got a shot, he's got playmaking, and he's got just an incredible motor on top of that. There was a lot to like about Tim Stutzle, and as the year went on, he started climbing up those rankings from 7 to 6 to 5, all the way to being a top 3 pick in the grand scheme of things. Now, there still were some conversations going around as to Lafreniere and Byfield and how these guys would be sort of ahead of the class, but towards the draft date, there were a few conversations starting up saying, hey, Tim Stutzle could be first overall. I mean, he was under a point per game in the top German league as a 17, 18-year-old, so that's really good, right? Why could this guy not go somewhere near the very top? And even though that was a talk that happened once in a while, he still ended up going third overall. Lafreniere and Byfield went 1 and 2, and now the rest is history. Tim Stutzle is signed on till 2031, making $8.35 million a season. And look, you talk about Leon Draisaitl and his 8.5 AAV by 8 years contract being so good and valuable. Tim Stutzle is literally doing the same thing as a German player coming into the NHL, doing really well and just dominating. Sure, he didn't have the second stint in the minors like Leon Draisaitl did. He actually played with the Oilers before getting sent down back into the WHL and then coming back, but either way, following up in the footsteps of that German phenom hockey story, he's definitely doing a pretty good job at it. Now, if you go over to the other two guys, Lafreniere and Byfield taken 1 and 2, you can see that in this season's worth of play, Lafreniere has 28 points in 56 games played. He has already bested his career high in assists, and he is on pace for 40 total points on the season, half a point a game. While that's not bad in the slightest, it's still not, first overall caliber-like production for a guy taken 3 years ago in the draft. If anything, Tim Stutzle is the guy showing off numbers that very much would identify with a first overall talent profile. Then you go over to Quinton Byfield and you see that this guy, he's also at half a point a game roughly. He's at 12 points in 28 games played this year with the LA Kings, on pace for 23 points in a total of 53 games. Now, I know both of these players, Lafreniere and Byfield, there's a lot of patience that needs to be involved with them. There's opportunity here. For Byfield, you've got Danault, you've got Kopitar ahead of you on the depth chart. You still have guys like Velarde in there. I get that they've actually been playing Byfield on the wing this past little while here. They've been playing him with, I believe it was Kopitar and Kempe, which is very good for him. It's reflected very positively on the statistics. But of course, when it comes to just pure being a center type of development, there are names ahead of him on the depth chart. For Lafreniere, it's been a weird conversation the entire past few months about winger spots and where he's going to play, where in the lineup, up and down. Is Lafreniere really going to find a home? Kid line, whatever line, top 6 line, you name it, it's been all over the place with Lafreniere. The difference with Stutzle is that this guy was already thrusted into being a one-stop shop for all the Ottawa Senators' needs in their top 6. Who's to say that a guy like Byfield or a guy like Lafreniere would not have thrived under the same conditions wherein the Senators got them onto their teams and they just said, hey, okay, look, do what you want. Like, you are our superstar in the making. We need you to be good. Here's a top 6 spot. Just do what it is that you need to do. Grow, develop, and become good in the future. I understand that there are totally a bunch of factors that have held back both Lafreniere and Byfield the past few years. For Lafreniere, it's his foot speed. We've talked about this the entire time. However, I'm going to go out there and argue that if he probably was playing top 6 minutes right from the get-go with talented players like, let's say, Brady Tkachuk, for example, he probably would have had a nicer start to his NHL career than what he ended up having in 2020-2021. As for Quinton Byfield, it's a little bit more difficult to really say this for sure because he had so many injury problems the past few years, but at the end of the day, even though there are a lot of other centers that are debatably ahead of Byfield on the chart, just having him in a position where he's playing top 6 now is a pretty good thing, but at the same time, I mean, he's still not outproducing Tim Stutzle just yet. So, at the time being, in 2023, February 21st here, Jimmy Stu is the best player from the 2021 draft. Or 2021, did I say that? No, 2020 draft, excuse me. Byfield, Lafreniere, these guys have a lot of time to catch up and eventually overtake Jimmy Stu like we knew they probably had the potential to. I still do feel like in their primes, Lafreniere could be a 100-point winger. I feel like Byfield could be a 90-point center. Think of Evgeny Malkin, but a little bit more finesse. For Tim Stutzle, the sky is the limit. He's already scoring at an 89-point pace. If he scores at just a regular 89-point pace for the rest of that contract till 2030, that $8.35 million a season is going to be pretty good. but we all kind of think he's going to be better than that, isn't he? So, ton of the comments are your thoughts about the NHL's first star of the week the past 7 days, Tim Stutzle of the Ottawa Senators, and how he has been better than both Lafreniere and Byfield so far. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.